The sound of tires crunching gravel echoed through the valley as Emily parked her sedan at the entrance of the mansion. She looked up at the facade, a Gothic structure that appeared even darker under the heavy, clouded sky. It had been years since she'd last set foot here, ever since she left home swearing never to rely on her father again. Yet here she was, forced by circumstances, standing once more on the soil that always seemed to carry secrets. Jacob was already there, leaning against his old truck with his hands in his pockets. He didn't look particularly at ease, which wasn't surprising. For Jacob, the world had always been a challenging place, but the mansion brought a unique discomfort. When Emily stepped out of the car, he raised a hand in a quick greeting, which she returned with a brief nod. It felt strange to be here again, but even stranger would be seeing Sarah, the youngest of the three, always so shielded by their father that she seemed to live in a world of her own. The silence was broken only by the wind rustling through the barren trees until a third car arrived, stopping a little farther away. Sarah stepped out gracefully, as was typical of her, dressed as though attending a business meeting despite the unwelcoming surroundings. Emily noticed Sarah hesitated before stepping onto the gravel, as if reconsidering her decision, but she straightened her shoulders and pressed on. Inside the mansion, the air was colder than outside. The hallways seemed narrower than Emily remembered, the walls lined with portraits of ancestors whose eyes followed visitors wherever they moved. The lawyer awaited them in the main hall, seated at the head of a long, dark wooden table. He was a thin man with a stern face, looking just as uneasy as the heirs. On the table rested a sealed envelope, a promise of the inevitable. "Welcome," he said, gesturing for them to sit. "The reading of your father's will won't be conventional, but he was very clear in his instructions. Before we begin, I must inform you that you are here not just to hear your shares of the inheritance but to participate in something greater." Emily crossed her arms, skeptical. Greater how? A contest to see who was his favorite. The lawyer ignored the sarcasm, adjusting his glasses. "The will isn't about money or property. It contains a request, a challenge. Only the one who uncovers what happened in the final days of your father's life will inherit everything. Otherwise, no one gets anything." Jacob let out a short, bitter laugh. "So that's it. The old man's got us playing one of his games. He always loved pulling the strings." "You have until dawn," the lawyer continued, unfazed by the comment. "I'll be here to clarify any doubts, but the details, well, you'll have to discover those on your own." The heavy front doors shut with a resounding thud, and the mansion seemed to hold its breath along with the heirs. Emily looked at her siblings, realizing this would be a long and uncomfortable reunion. They were led to their respective rooms, the same ones they had occupied as children, though everything now seemed different. Emily couldn't decide if it was the weight of time or something more, something in the air that made every shadow seem deeper and every sound more distant. She settled into her room, but sleep eluded her. Jacob, however, couldn't sit still. He wandered the house as he used to as a teenager, exploring every corner to soothe his restless mind. He passed the library, the music room, and finally stopped in front of their father's office. The door was locked, as it always had been, but something was different now. A rusty key hung from the outside, as if inviting him in. Sarah, on the other hand, preferred introspection. Sitting on the bed, she held a photo of the family taken many years ago, on a day so distant it felt almost fictional. She wondered how well she truly knew her siblings and, more importantly, how well she knew herself. Meanwhile, Emily sifted through her memories, trying to find a pattern, something that made sense. Why would their father do something so cruel and convoluted? What was he trying to prove, even in death? The questions kept her awake, and the sound of distant footsteps in the hallways didn't help. The first night in the mansion brought more questions than answers. And the clock, ticking almost imperceptibly, seemed to be racing against them. Jacob had been restless since he set foot in the mansion. There was something about this place that had always unsettled him, and now, with the challenge his father had laid out, everything felt even more claustrophobic. He decided to wander the hallways, hoping to shake off the thoughts that had plagued him since the reading of the will. Entering his old bedroom, he felt a twinge of nostalgia, but also a creeping unease. The space felt untouched, as though no one had entered it since his last visit years ago. As he adjusted the bed covers, something slipped out from between the sheets. It was a keychain with the letter E on it. Jacob held the object up, examining it under the dim light. There was no mistaking it, it belonged to Emily. He frowned, wondering why it was there. He remembered how meticulous she was with her belongings, and this felt deliberate. Had she placed it there on purpose? Or was it another one of their father's manipulations? In the adjacent room, Sarah sat deep in thought. She had placed the envelope she'd received with the invitation to the will reading on the bed. Inside was a single piece of paper bearing the cryptic message, "The truth lies in the mistakes." Since arriving at the mansion, she'd been trying to decipher what it meant. It wasn't the kind of phrase her father would toss around lightly. Rummaging through drawers and closets, Sarah stumbled upon something odd, a small safe hidden beneath a false bottom in the wardrobe. It was heavy, made of dark metal, and appeared old. There was no visible combination, but the lock showed signs of frequent use. She tried to force it open, but the safe wouldn't budge. Whatever was inside felt important, and Sarah knew she needed to figure out how to open it. In the library, Emily remained focused on finding answers. From the moment the lawyer had mentioned the challenge, her mind had switched into strategy mode. If she had learned anything in life, it was the importance of staying one step ahead. As she scanned the dusty shelves, her fingers ran over the spines of the books. One of them seemed out of place. Pulling it, she heard a faint click, and a portion of the bookshelf slid aside to reveal a hidden passageway. The passage was narrow, lit faintly by a broken chandelier above. Emily hesitated before stepping inside, but her curiosity outweighed her fear. The passage led to a small office that appeared to have been used recently. Papers were scattered across the desk, along with a detailed map of the mansion and notes written in her father's unmistakable handwriting. Before she could examine them further, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. Someone was approaching. Emily quickly turned off the light and stood still, holding her breath. The figure paused at the entrance to the passage, and Emily remained frozen. After a few tense seconds, the steps moved away, fading into the distance. Meanwhile, Jacob, still holding the keychain, decided to confront Emily. He found her emerging from the library and held the object up without a word. She narrowed her eyes but maintained her composure. "If you're trying something, it's not going to work," Jacob said, his tone laced with suspicion. "I didn't even know this was here," Emily replied, taking the keychain from him. "But if you think it's some kind of clue, maybe you should look at yourself before pointing fingers." The two stared at each other for a moment before Jacob turned and walked away, muttering something about not trusting her. Elsewhere, Sarah remained fixated on the safe she'd found. With the lawyer nowhere to be found, she had no one to ask for help. She decided to take a more direct approach, using a letter opener to try and force the lock. After several minutes of effort, the safe finally gave way, revealing a sealed envelope and a handful of old photographs. The photos showed Sarah in moments she didn't remember living, sitting in a park with an unfamiliar man, walking down an empty street at night, and, most unsettling of all, sitting in a black car with her father. A chill ran through her as she realized the details were too precise to be fabricated. She opened the envelope with trembling hands and found a note that read, "The mistakes of the past never disappear, they only wait to be revealed." Emily, determined to continue her search, returned to the hidden office. The map pointed her toward the basement, a section marked as sealed. She decided it was worth investigating. Jacob, still grappling with the implications of the keychain, wandered back to the wine cellar, a place he used to visit as a teenager to sneak bottles from their father's collection. Now, the room felt darker, the shelves dustier, and many of the bottles shattered on the floor. As he moved deeper into the cellar, something caught his eye, a black notebook hidden among the intact bottles. Flipping through its pages, Jacob found entries written by his father. What caught his attention were passages describing him in detail, his legal troubles, his expulsion from school, even an incident he thought no one knew about. It was as though his father had tracked every moment of his life. On the final page, written in red ink, was a chilling statement: Jacob knows more than he admits. The clock in the main hall struck midnight, the chime reverberating through the mansion like a warning. The three siblings reconvened in the main hall, each carrying their own revelations. Emily spread the map across the table. "This isn't just about money. He was testing us for something bigger. I don't know what he wanted, but I'm sure it wasn't just about who gets the house or the bank account." Jacob placed the notebook on the table with a heavy thud. He was watching us. All of us. And he left breadcrumbs because he wanted us to find this stuff. Sarah held up the photos and the note she'd found. "This isn't random. He wanted us to find these things, to remember things we might have buried." The clock struck midnight again, its echo filling the silence as the three siblings stared at each other. For all their discoveries, it felt as though they were no closer to understanding their father's twisted game. The tension in the mansion grew heavier as the night wore on. Each sibling immersed themselves in their investigations, not only unraveling the mystery surrounding their father's death but also confronting the secrets they had buried long ago. Jacob, still fuming from his encounter with Emily, decided to distance himself from the others and explore the mansion's lower floors. He wandered into the wine cellar, a place he had often retreated to as a teenager. Now, the space seemed darker, the air heavier. While navigating the narrow aisles of broken bottles and dust-covered shelves, Jacob noticed something unusual, a small compartment hidden beneath a pile of crates. Inside the compartment, he found a metal box secured with a simple lock. He pried it open with a tool he'd found nearby and uncovered a bundle of handwritten letters. The paper smelled of age, and the words on them were unmistakably in his father's handwriting. As Jacob scanned the letters, he realized they were addressed to someone unknown, but their contents were damning. They spoke of mistakes and unavoidable regrets, as though their father had been confessing his sins to someone in secret. On the last letter, written in bold ink, were the words, "Jacob knows more than he lets on." On the second floor, Emily followed the map she had discovered in the secret office. The map led her to a locked room she had never seen before. The key to the door, as indicated on the map, was hidden under a rug. Once inside, she found a small wall safe. A piece of paper with a 4-digit combination was taped next to it, as though her father had wanted her to open it. When Emily input the numbers, the safe opened smoothly, revealing a single sheet of paper with a cryptic message: "Sometimes sacrifice is the only proof of character." She stared at the note, turning the words over in her mind. What kind of sacrifice was her father asking for? Meanwhile, Sarah remained fixated on the photographs and letters she had found in the hidden safe. Returning to the office, she sifted through the bookshelves and desk drawers, searching for more clues. Behind one of the shelves, she discovered a concealed compartment containing a journal. The journal began innocently enough, detailing business dealings and plans for the family estate, but the final pages were filled with haunting reflections. Her father had written extensively about his regrets and about orchestrating something he called the final game. One passage sent a chill down Sarah's spine: "They will hate me for this, but it is the only way. The truth must come to light, no matter the cost." As the siblings continued their separate pursuits, each one became more entangled in their father's web of secrets. Emily returned to the main hall, determined to share her findings. She laid the map and the paper from the safe on the table. Jacob arrived moments later, carrying the letters he'd found in the cellar. "You're not going to believe this," he said, tossing the letters onto the table. "Believe what?" Emily asked, scanning the papers. "He wrote about me," Jacob said, his tone bitter. "Every mistake I ever made, every wrong turn. It's like he kept a running tally of everything I did. And now, he's using it against us." Sarah entered the room quietly, clutching the journal. "He did the same to me," she said, placing the journal beside the map. "He knew things about my life I never even told anyone. He was keeping secrets, but he was also keeping track of ours." Emily glanced at the map, then at her siblings. "This isn't just about who gets the inheritance," she said firmly. "This is about him forcing us to face something. I don't know what yet, but it's bigger than money." Jacob crossed his arms. "You think he's trying to teach us some kind of moral lesson? That's rich, coming from him." Sarah hesitated, then added, "Maybe it's not about the lesson. Maybe it's about redemption. For him. For us." Jacob let out a bitter laugh. "Redemption? He doesn't deserve it. And neither do we." Emily ignored his cynicism. "There's more to this house than we've seen. The map points to a sealed room in the basement. If we're going to figure this out, we need to go there." Reluctantly, the three of them agreed. They descended into the basement, their flashlights cutting through the thick darkness. The air grew colder as they moved deeper into the mansion's foundations. At the end of a narrow hallway, they found a heavy door, its surface marked with strange, unfamiliar symbols. Emily stepped forward, consulting the map. "This is it," she said. The door was locked, but beside it hung an old key that fit perfectly into the lock. With a creak, the door swung open to reveal a small, empty room. In the center stood a table with a blackboard resting on it. Written on the board in chalk were the words, "The last one out, turn off the lights." The three of them stared at the message, its meaning unclear but unsettling nonetheless. As they stepped further into the room, the mansion seemed to hum with an almost imperceptible vibration, as if it were alive and aware of their presence. The air was heavy with the weight of unspoken truths, and each sibling felt as though they were standing on the edge of a revelation they weren't ready to face. The sound of the mansion's clock striking midnight reverberated through the halls, its echo lingering like a warning. The three siblings remained in the small room in the basement, staring at the cryptic message written on the blackboard. The weight of the words pressed down on them, but none of them could decipher what they truly meant. Jacob broke the silence first, his tone sharp. "Why were you even in the basement, Emily? Looking for something to use against us?" Emily didn't flinch. "I'm trying to figure out what this all means, unlike you, who's busy pointing fingers instead of solving the puzzle." "Oh, so now you're the hero?" Jacob shot back. "Enough." Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "This is exactly what he wanted, to turn us against each other. Don't you see? We're playing right into his hands." Emily exhaled, forcing herself to stay calm. "Sarah's right. If we keep fighting, we're never going to figure this out. We have to focus." Jacob shook his head but said nothing, his frustration evident. Emily turned back to the map she had found earlier. "There's more to this place. The map shows areas we haven't even explored yet." They left the basement together, the air between them still charged with tension. Back in the main hall, they paused to collect their thoughts. Jacob, unable to shake his frustration, wandered off toward the wine cellar again. Emily studied the map closely, her finger tracing the markings that led to another unexplored section of the mansion. Sarah hesitated before heading back to their father's office, unable to ignore the feeling that she had missed something important there. In the cellar, Jacob searched through the shelves with a renewed sense of determination. He felt as if the answers he sought were just out of reach. Behind a pile of broken crates, he discovered a hidden compartment. Inside was another box, smaller than the one he had found earlier, with an old padlock holding it shut. He grabbed a nearby crowbar and forced it open. Inside the box, he found a set of envelopes, each labeled with a different name: Emily, Sarah, Jacob. His heart pounded as he opened the envelope with his name. The letter inside was handwritten in his father's unmistakable script. Jacob, you've always been the one who questions everything. But do you ever stop to question yourself? The truth is closer than you think, but you have to be willing to face it. If you can't, the weight of it will destroy you. The words hit Jacob harder than he expected. He stuffed the letter back into the envelope and left the cellar, his mind racing. Upstairs, Emily followed the map to a locked door she hadn't noticed before. The key to the door was taped behind a painting nearby, exactly where the map indicated. She unlocked it and stepped inside. The room was sparse, with only a single table and a safe built into the wall. The safe's combination was scribbled on a piece of paper on the table, as if her father had wanted her to open it. Inside the safe, Emily found a single folded note. It read, "Sacrifice is the only true measure of character." Emily stared at the note, trying to make sense of it. Was this another test? Another manipulation? She folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket before leaving the room. Meanwhile, in the office, Sarah searched through the bookshelves, feeling an unshakable pull toward one of them. She pulled out a heavy tome, and a hidden compartment behind the shelf slid open. Inside, she found a small journal. The journal contained a mix of mundane business notes and deeply personal reflections. The final entries were the most disturbing. I know they'll hate me for this. But what choice do I have? They need to see the truth for themselves. Only then will they understand. The words made Sarah's hands tremble. She closed the journal and sat down, overwhelmed by the weight of the revelations. The three siblings reconvened in the main hall, each carrying the results of their investigations. Emily placed the note she'd found on the table. Jacob set the envelopes next to it, and Sarah added the journal. This isn't about the inheritance anymore, Sarah said quietly. This is about him trying to force us to confront something. Ourselves, maybe. Or each other. Jacob folded his arms. Confront what? The fact that he was a manipulative control freak? He's still pulling our strings, even from the grave. Emily leaned forward, her voice steady. Maybe it's not just about us. Maybe it's about the choices we make from here on out. He left us these clues for a reason. We just haven't figured out what it is yet. Before they could discuss further, the sound of footsteps echoed from one of the hallways. They all turned toward the noise, their tension rising. A figure appeared in the doorway, the lawyer. You're closer to the truth than you think, he said, his voice calm but unsettling. Without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the mansion. The siblings stared after him, unsure of what to make of his cryptic words. The clock in the main hall struck 1, its chime lingering like a reminder that time was slipping away. The mansion seemed to hold its breath after the lawyer's sudden appearance and equally abrupt disappearance. The siblings exchanged wary glances, the weight of his words pressing heavily on them. None of them spoke, each lost in their own thoughts as they tried to piece together the meaning behind everything they had discovered so far. Emily broke the silence, her tone sharp but focused. He said, "We're closer to the truth. That means there's more to find. We need to keep moving." Jacob let out a frustrated sigh, holding up the letters he'd found. "And what about these? They're just more of his manipulations. I'm done playing along with his games." Sarah, standing near the table where they had gathered the clues, spoke softly. "It's not just a game, Jacob. It's a puzzle. And I think he wanted us to solve it together." Emily ignored their bickering, focusing instead on the map she'd been studying. Her finger traced a route to the attic, where another marked location had gone unexplored. "The next clue might be here," she said, pointing to the map. Jacob rolled his eyes. "Of course. The creepiest part of the house. Why not?" Reluctantly, the three made their way to the attic. The stairs creaked beneath their weight, and the air grew colder as they ascended. At the top of the staircase was a heavy wooden door, its surface worn but sturdy. A rusted lock hung loosely from the latch, but it gave way easily when Jacob forced it open. The attic was vast and dimly lit, with only a few shafts of moonlight streaming through a small window. In the center of the room was an old table with an outdated television set and a stack of VHS tapes. Dust hung in the air, undisturbed for years. Sarah stepped forward and picked up one of the tapes. The label read simply, "For my children." She hesitated, her fingers trembling slightly, before placing the tape into the VCR. The screen flickered to life, revealing their father's face, grainy and worn from the age of the recording. He sat in his office, his expression somber and tired. "If you're watching this," he began, "then you've come far enough to deserve some answers. But know this, what you are about to see and hear will change everything." The three siblings stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the screen as their father continued. "I wasn't a perfect man," he said. "I made choices that can't be justified, but every decision I made was for you. You may not understand now, but one day, you will. What's happening in this mansion is not just a test. It's a revelation." The image flickered briefly before stabilizing again. Their father leaned closer to the camera, his eyes intense. "One of you tried to kill me." The words hung in the air, cutting through the silence like a blade. Emily, Jacob, and Sarah exchanged stunned glances, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. The recording continued. "I survived, but it was a wake-up call. I knew I couldn't trust any of you completely. It wasn't your fault, it was mine. I created this family, and I broke it. That's why I made this game. To find out who you really are, and who among you can be saved." The screen shifted to footage of their father walking through the mansion. He spoke directly to the camera, his tone growing more somber. "You'll find clues about the past, my mistakes, my secrets, and your own. The time you have is limited, but what you do with it will determine everything. By dawn, the game will end, and only the one who understands the meaning of all this will inherit everything." The screen went black, but the weight of his words lingered in the room. Jacob was the first to speak, his voice trembling with anger. He knew. He knew someone tried to kill him, and instead of confronting us, he turned it into some sick game. What kind of father does that? Emily stared at the now blank screen, her expression unreadable. This isn't just about what he knew. It's about what he wanted us to see, about ourselves, about him. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. And what if he's right? What if this is about redemption? Redemption? Jacob laughed bitterly. He destroyed us. He used us like pieces on a chessboard. And now he wants redemption? That's rich. Emily tried to stay composed, though her frustration was evident. We don't have time for this. There's another tape here. Sarah picked up a second tape from the stack. This one was unlabeled. She inserted it into the VCR, and the screen flickered again. This time, the footage showed their father in his office, writing in the black notebook Jacob had found earlier. This will be my final record, he said. If anything happens to me, I want my children to know the truth. I've made many enemies in my life, but my greatest fear has always been my own family. I love them, but I know what they're capable of. And I know what I'm guilty of. In the end, all that matters is the truth. And the truth, my children, is that I was a terrible man. Perhaps you are my only chance at redemption. The recording ended abruptly, leaving the siblings in silence once more. Jacob clenched his fists, his anger boiling over. This doesn't explain anything. It just proves how messed up he was. It explains enough, Emily said firmly. He wanted us to face the truth, no matter how painful it is. Sarah looked between her siblings, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But what do we do now? What happens next? Emily studied the map again, her focus unshaken. There's one more place we haven't checked. The main hall. The three descended from the attic, the weight of their father's revelations pressing down on them. In the main hall, Emily approached the fireplace, examining its intricate carvings. Something about it seemed out of place. There's a compartment here, she said, running her fingers along the edges of the stone. With a soft click, a section of the fireplace slid open, revealing a small wooden box. The box bore the same symbol as the metal Sarah had found earlier. Emily inserted the metal into a slot on the box, and it opened with a creak. Inside was a folded letter and a small electronic device. She unfolded the letter and read it aloud. If you've come this far, you're ready for the truth. This device contains everything you need to know, but be warned, the truth has a price, and not all of you will be willing to pay it. Only one of you can make the final choice. Choose wisely. The siblings stared at the device in silence. Emily picked it up, her expression resolute. We need to see what's on it. There's a computer in his office. Let's go. As they made their way back upstairs, the gravity of the moment settled over them. The clock in the main hall struck 2. Time was running out. The mansion's halls seemed to pulse with an eerie stillness as the siblings climbed the staircase to their father's office. Emily led the way, gripping the device they had found in the fireplace. Behind her, Jacob and Sarah followed silently, each consumed by their own thoughts. The weight of their father's final message hung heavy in the air, the promise of answers balanced by the threat of more pain. When they reached the office, Emily placed the device on the desk and powered on the old computer. The screen flickered to life, revealing a single folder labeled Final Testament. Emily clicked on it, and a new window opened with a single video file. This is it, she said, glancing at her siblings. Let's get it over with, Jacob muttered, crossing his arms. Emily clicked the video, and their father's face appeared on the screen once again. His expression was grim, his voice steady but tinged with weariness. If you've reached this point, he began, you are standing on the edge of the truth. Everything I have done, every test I've put you through, was to bring you here. But now, the choice is yours. The screen cut to a countdown timer, set for 1 hour. Below the timer were 2 options: discover the truth and claim the inheritance. Jacob leaned closer to the screen, his brows furrowed. What the hell is this? He wants us to pick between the truth and the money? Emily stared at the options, her mind racing. It's another test. He's forcing us to choose what's more important. Sarah's voice was shaky as she asked, but what happens if we pick one or the other? He didn't say anything about the consequences. Of course he didn't, Jacob snapped. He wants us to make the decision blind. That's the whole point of his sick game. The siblings stood frozen, the weight of the choice pressing down on them. The timer ticked down, each passing second an audible reminder of their dwindling time. Emily, always the strategist, tried to reason through the options. If we choose the inheritance, everything we've done so far will mean nothing. But if we choose the truth, we need to be prepared for whatever comes next. Jacob clenched his fists, his frustration boiling over. You think the truth is going to save us? It's probably just another one of his manipulations. He didn't want us to win, he wanted to destroy us. Sarah, surprisingly calm, took a step forward. Maybe it's not about him anymore. Maybe it's about us. If we don't face the truth now, we'll carry his lies with us forever. Emily looked at her sister, then at Jacob, before nodding slowly. We choose the truth. With trembling fingers, she clicked the Discover the Truth option. The screen went black for a moment before displaying a series of files. One by one, Emily opened them, revealing the contents. The files contained a detailed dossier of their father's life, his business dealings, his manipulations, and his secrets. Financial transactions tied to shady organizations. Correspondences with powerful figures discussing unethical schemes. Contracts that implicated him in illegal activities. But it wasn't just about him. Interspersed among the documents were files about each of the siblings. Their father had documented their lives meticulously, highlighting their flaws, their mistakes, and their secrets. One file revealed that their father had deliberately set them against each other, planting seeds of mistrust to keep them divided. Another detailed how he had manipulated events in their lives, from Emily's career to Jacob's legal troubles, and even Sarah's relationships. At the bottom of the list was an audio file labeled Final Confession. Emily clicked on it, and their father's voice filled the room. They say the sins of the father are visited upon the children, but I never wanted that for you. Everything I did because I thought it was the only way to protect you. But in doing so, I became the monster I always feared. I destroyed our family because I thought it would save it. Now, all I can hope for is that you'll find the strength to fix what I broke. The recording ended, leaving the room in heavy silence. Jacob broke it with a bitter laugh. Fix what he broke? How? He's the one who ruined everything. Emily shook her head. Maybe we can't fix it. But at least now we know the truth. That has to count for something. Sarah looked at her siblings, her voice quiet but resolute. He made us his pawns. But we don't have to stay that way. We can decide what happens next. The timer on the screen reached 0, and the computer shut down. The siblings braced themselves, expecting something dramatic, but nothing happened. The mansion remained silent, as if waiting for them to make their next move. They left the office together, descending the grand staircase to the main hall. The night had stretched on endlessly, but dawn was finally beginning to break, its faint light filtering through the mansion's windows. Emily turned to her siblings, her expression thoughtful. Maybe we'll never forgive him. Maybe we'll never forgive each other. But at least now we know who we are. Jacob nodded grudgingly, while Sarah offered a small, tentative smile. As they stepped outside into the cold morning air, the mansion loomed behind them, its secrets finally unearthed. Yet, as they drove away, none of them noticed the small, sealed envelope placed neatly on the main hall table, bearing 3 unfamiliar names. The game was not over. The clock struck 3 in the morning, but for Emily, Jacob, and Sarah, time seemed irrelevant. The mansion was silent now, almost expectant, as if waiting for the final chapter of their father's twisted game to unfold. The truth had been laid bare, but the weight of what they had learned felt heavier than any of them could carry. The siblings descended the stairs from the office in silence, their footsteps echoing softly against the wooden floors. Each was lost in their own thoughts, struggling to process the revelations they had uncovered. Emily was the first to speak, her voice cutting through the quiet. He destroyed everything. Our trust. Our family. And for what? To teach us some moral lesson about the truth? Jacob scoffed, the anger in his tone unmistakable. If that's what he thought, then he was even more delusional than we gave him credit for. Sarah, who had been trailing behind them, stopped in her tracks. Maybe it wasn't about teaching us. Maybe it was about himself. He needed to make sense of his life. And we were just collateral damage. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, none of them could respond. They gathered once more in the main hall, the faint light of dawn creeping through the tall windows. The house, so full of secrets, now seemed hollow, like the remnants of a stage after the curtain had fallen. Jacob paced near the fireplace, his frustration still simmering. So what now? We've uncovered everything. The truth. His lies. What the hell are we supposed to do with it? Emily leaned against the table, her eyes fixed on the map they had used throughout the night. We have a choice, she said finally. We can expose everything, tell the world who he really was, or we can let it die with him. And which one gets us out of this mess? Jacob asked, his voice laced with sarcasm. Neither, Sarah said quietly. No matter what we choose, we'll have to live with it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Each of them knew the weight of the decision they had to make, but none of them wanted to speak first. Finally, Emily straightened, her expression resolute. I think we've been running from this for too long. From him. From each other. Maybe it's time to stop. Jacob let out a bitter laugh. Stop? You think one decision is going to fix all of this? He didn't just break us, he made sure we'd stay broken. Sarah looked at her older siblings, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her eyes. Maybe he did. But we don't have to let him win. We can choose something different. The conversation didn't resolve everything. It couldn't. But there was a quiet understanding among them as they gathered the remaining evidence and prepared to leave the mansion. As they stepped outside, the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, casting a soft glow over the sprawling estate. For the first time in hours, the oppressive weight of the mansion began to lift. Before they parted ways, Emily turned to her siblings. We may never forgive him, she said. And we may never forgive each other. But at least we know the truth now. And that's more than we had before. Jacob gave a slight nod, while Sarah offered a tentative smile. It wasn't much, but it was something. As they drove away, leaving the mansion and its secrets behind, none of them noticed the small envelope that had been placed neatly on the table in the main hall. It bore 3 new names, written in precise handwriting. The game wasn't over.